Hello, everyone, and welcome today. I can see lots of squares being added, so come on in. And as you can see, we are in a Zoom meeting. So if you're comfortable, and when you want to show us your pretty face, you don't have to. I recognize you may be eating a late lunch or a late breakfast, depending upon what part of the country you're in. And I know that we'll have more and more folks rolling in, certainly over usually the first 5 minutes or so. So we will continue to let folks roll in here, but we want to get started. So I just want to welcome you today. And I'll introduce myself very briefly. I'm the moderator and the host with BetterMynd for this fantastic panel and roundtable event together. Just want to acknowledge that this is post-election day, and there are a lot of feelings for us as a country. Feelingswheel.com, great resource. If you want to pull that up, try to pin down exactly what you're feeling or the many things you're feeling. And then we know for our students on campuses, something like the presidential election is only adding to the experiences that they already have that could be connected to global events, national events, or just the epidemic loneliness that we know is happening, the struggle to have a sense of belonging and feel community. And so today is a great day to talk about student well-being. So I'm so glad that you are with us. Like I said, my name's Elise. I'm with BetterMynd. I have been supporting colleges and universities through ed tech companies. So I work in marketing, and let's see, for the past about 12 years, I've been working with colleges and universities to support, in particular, student success efforts and programs. I'm here in Boston, Massachusetts. So there are millions, I don't know if there's millions, thousands of college and university students around me every day. And really excited to be here with you for the next hour and a half. And I want to welcome my co-host today, Sheree, to welcome you as well. So Sheree.
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Sheree Watkins, and I serve as the Associate Vice President over Student Health and Wellness here at the University of Utah. Here in my role, I have the honor of overseeing our University Counseling Center, our Center for Campus Wellness, our Center for Disability and Access, our Center for Financial Wellness, our University Counseling Center, and our Center for Recreation Services. And so it's truly a joy just to be here and to contribute to the conversation, and also to gain information from my colleagues who's on the panel with me. And so also possibly even hear some feedback from our audience, because everyone has something to contribute to this conversation. Thank you, Elise.
Yeah, thank you for doing this with us. And I will have Dr. Jones and Dr. Overocker introduce themselves because they'll do it better than I can. I'll have them introduce themselves in just a minute, but a few minutes on that and some context as well on why we're here today. So this is a really fantastic report that I recommend. Alex will drop that in the chat. But the number 2 reason that students are stopping out, not persisting, is because of personal mental health reasons. The number 1 is emotional stress. I mean, in some ways you could call those one and the same. So we know the challenge. Students have shared with us. And no surprise to the folks on the call here too. Some other really good research done around this is also helping to highlight the disconnect between the services that are available to students and their awareness of them. And there's even another section of this report that shows the utilization, which plummets. So do you have it? That's one thing. Do students know about it? About half the time, it looks like pretty consistently no. And then even below that is, do they use the things they know about? So that's a big part of what I also want to bring up and engage us in today, which is that challenge of connecting that disconnect. And back to just again, a little context on what BetterMynd does. Our services sit in the midst of this. And so we offer mental health services that range from what we'd call intervention services to crisis and health promotion. And we've been doing this. We're going into our 8th year as a business, several years before the pandemic. So who knew how popular online mental health services and support would become a few years later, but they were needed then too. And we just feel incredibly grateful to be able to support so many colleges and universities across the country. And just tying kind of connecting back to that information that we know about both the challenges students face and then that disconnect in the utilization. What we do that's a bit different is our model, and it's looking at equitable, not equal support. And there's, again, Alex will share some really good research and studies around the fact that most of your students are not using or will not use the counseling services on campus, but those that do need it need really different things, tremendously different individualized needs. And so the way that we work to support that is a model that directly supports the need. So you purchase a bucket of sessions based on your need and your budget, and then you allocate that to the individual needs, and whatever isn't used rolls over to the next academic year. So that's the heart of how we are looking at actual student need and usage, and then a model that we feel like really supports our campuses in addressing that. And then the result is meeting the individual needs of the student. And that looks so different. We know that from these reports and from from your own campuses. So that's why we host events like this and convenings. This work really matters very deeply to us. It's how we work as a business. And I'm just so grateful for you all joining us today. So a little bit about us, and now we're going to move to Dr. Jones. Why don't we start with you? And then we'll go to Dr. Overocker, since Sheree, we got to hear from you at the opening. So Terry Ann, go ahead.
Thanks, Elise, and good afternoon or morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dr. Terry Ann Jones. I'm Deputy Provost for Undergraduate Education at Lehigh University, and I wear many hats under that term, but the primary ones I would say involve student success. So academic success in particular, student advising, retention, persistence, among some other areas that I'll talk about some more this afternoon.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll follow with a good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josh Overocker. I'm an Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And some of my portfolio is similar to Sheree's. I have our health and well-being, and so campus recreation, University Health Center, working with our counseling and psychological services. And then I work with some traditional student life auxiliary, so housing and dining and our unions and campus rec area fit underneath of that portfolio. And I'm glad to be here today for the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you all. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen because the whole point here is that we can be together as a community. And let's get going with our panel and conversation. So post-election day, I'm sure your campuses are feeling it, as we all are. And as everyone is grappling with how to support student well-being, especially on a day like today, a moment like this, can each of you share what well-being means at your institutions right now? How are you defining it, wrapping your arms around it? And let's have Sheree, and then Terry Ann, and then Josh share. So Sheree.
Thank you for the first question. If I can start, I always like to level set, as I like to say, and always share that we typically like to use wellness and well-being as the same term, and it's not the same. I will say, like, prior to us logging in, Josh stole my thunder. So we at the University of Utah also use the inter-association definition of well-being, but just to make sure we're all using the same term. With it not being the same thing, wellness is like the baby up under the umbrella of well-being. It's a component of it. And so wellness focuses on like the proactive movement, the lifestyle approach, in our practices to well-being. So what we call the footsteps. While well-being encompasses like the overall life satisfaction, your quality of life, your purpose, your holistic health. So that's what I like to start with, to make sure we're all using the same language and also a more simplified term. And so the interassociation, and what that term means is that when you look at all of the associations within higher education that we all may be a part of, everything from NERSA to NASPA to ACHA to ACPA and everything in between, we all decided within the last year to say, why don't we come together and have one definition that we all can get on board with? And so we came up with that definition. And so to be very simple, how are we applying that? Because it's about the action. How we're applying that to our campus is really trying to build out a culture of care. And so we have to look at that twofold. How are we doing that from our students' viewpoint as far as interpersonal? And then how are we building that as far as a culture for our community? And so, in looking at it, that I oversee our students, and also from the community standpoint, as far as the culture, it's an ongoing state. It's ever evolving. And even today it is evolving as we have to serve a diverse student and faculty staff population. But the overall intent is to achieve, to help our students to achieve their full potential and to support them personally here on this campus, but also as they hopefully to persist and graduate, to make sure that they have the tools to be community focused and also to engage back into the communities that we send them back to. And so we use a wellness wheel that has 9 components, everything from physical. We do incorporate cultural and spiritual. I know people often ask, with us being in a predominant religious state, we very much hone in on the spiritual wellness component by saying that spirituality is not religion. It doesn't necessarily incorporate faith. And so we try to make sure for our students, they understand that spirituality is about your purpose, your passion, who are you, and in that development. And so we want to make sure in using this comprehensive approach to well-being, again, going back to that life satisfaction, that purpose, that holistic health, have we created an ecosystem that is sustainable? That means constantly approaching it with from a lens of flexibility, that also that we can often pivot and also assess, are we creating holistic and integrative approaches to all of our students' needs, to make sure that we're increasing resiliency and making sure that our services and programs are equitable. Because at the end of the day, once they enter and once they exit, are we creating holistic health and wellness?
Thank you, Sheree. I really appreciate that. Terry Ann, how about you? How are you thinking about this at Lehigh?
So similarly, we have a number of dimensions of student well-being that we consider. Emotional, which supports students' mental health needs; intellectual, in that sense, thinking of academic development; environmental, which considers our lived environments; financial, which supports financial literacy and management. We think about occupational well-being, guiding students through their study choices and preparing them for professional life. Physical, which emphasizes physical health and wellness, and thank you for that distinction, Sheree. Sexual well-being, which supports the understanding of sexual health, identity, and gender equity. Social, recognizing the need for students to build community. And spiritual, which again, as Sheree pointed out, really encouraging students to live in alignment with their values and beliefs, and not necessarily focusing on religion per se. And so thinking holistically and broadly about well-being in my area, traditionally the focus would have been on the academics, but we realize that the students are not ultimately here for a piece of paper, and there's so many other dimensions that we need to focus on in order for students to develop that resiliency and to be successful. And we can talk about how we're defining that, but I would say that having that kind of holistic self-awareness is part of that success. And we're thinking of the students well beyond the time when they're at the institution. So that I would say is our definition.
Yeah, lots of good crossover. The wheels are very similar. And then Josh, how about you? Similar themes?
I would say ditto with the process. Obviously, Sheree stole my thunder. We were using the inter-association definition. So thanks for leading us in there. And we have 8 dimensions, not the 9 for it, but it's very similar in that, folks. And so it really is the broad collective approach to well-being and all of the spaces. And I think that's an important, Terry, and I love your comment, like it's environmental, it's a built environment. Like what are those services and spaces we're doing that create access to well-being beyond simply providing resource or support? And so it's the preventive approach. And sometimes that preventive approach is what do we put in place that allow people to experience well-being even before we bring in health promotion outreach or financial well-being, or what are those spaces that allow students? So I think that's an important part of the conversation, that it's not just the toolbox that says, oh, this student needs help, how do we provide help? It's how do we remove the barriers before they even experience that becomes a part of well-being holistically. I think, Elise, you had alluded to, and I want to acknowledge here on our campus and on many, there's an additional pressure on well-being today. And so how are we supporting students for that? And I think, Sheree, you alluded to it, the individual, like, what is this focus on care and well-being? We really have taken that to look at the existing communities of care that we already have in place and individual support for students. So as we speak right now, we have a Dish It Up program going on in our multicultural center. It was previously scheduled, weekly event that happens, but today's event was intentionally scheduled to be an election discussion. That's probably more important today for that community as a result of it, that I think it's an acknowledgement that well-being is ever changing and evolving and is responsive to what's happening around us. And that there is no one singular approach to it.
I really appreciate that. And I'm thinking, Josh, I might have you answer this next, because you actually brought up a really good example to my next question, which is, so right post-election day, you may have students who are feeling particularly disconnected or disillusioned, or they may not know how. They may have a response or an emotion, hopelessness, hopefulness, and they actually aren't even sure where or how to express that. Like and so I'm just curious, how are you thinking about fostering a sense of community, recognizing that there might be some real disconnects within the community? So just, you mentioned the event today, Josh. Any other things come to mind? And then would love to hear from Terry Ann and Sheree.
I will approach this broadly. I think you acknowledge that we have, in many of our states, certainly here in Nebraska, have a variety of opinions on the election and on the number of ballot initiatives that happened here in our state. And so if we didn't have an existing community of care in place, we aren't going to build it today. And so an acknowledgement, again, that we can't do this if we're reactionary, and that part of this is the creation intentional approach to how we provide individual and collective well-being environments for our students throughout, so that when stressful circumstances happen, I'll be candid, here at Nebraska, we approached election as it's finals week. Students have stress. We know that when it's stressful situations, they need additional resources, support, and opportunity. So we've put those pieces in place already. We had a number of stress reduction workshops already scheduled for this week, regardless of how the election went. The election was going to be stressful, and we put that in place. And so we honestly, that was the theme, was it's finals week. Students are stressed. What do they need? And we built our framing and support around that, just as you would a midterm or a finals week or another stressful event. And if you aren't prepared, or you didn't build the supportive communities beforehand, you can't do it. I couldn't do it at 4 o'clock this morning.
I really appreciate that. Terry Ann, how about you?
Well, for starters, I'm in the state of Pennsylvania. So complicated to begin with. One of the things that Lehigh University instituted a few years ago was to not have classes on election day. So it's civic engagement day. And so the students have the opportunity to engage, to not have any exams or let alone classes, and to really focus there and to have conversations. Today, the day after, as everyone's processing, I imagine that there may be concerns that are not unwarranted, and I expect that different demographic groups may experience challenges that arise differently. However, I'm confident that this institution will stay true to its mission, its vision, and its core values. These will not change. And these commitments and the guiding principles that accompany them will remain central to how we support all of our students and the general campus community. So I appreciate what Josh pointed out about consistency over time, not just being reactionary. So these are our fundamental beliefs, right? Really serving all of our students. And so continuing to do so is how we're facing any challenge that arises.
I appreciate that. I saw a lot of like nodding and note taking when you said civic engagement day, no classes. I thought, ooh, this is good idea, good ideas. Sheree, how about you on this fostering community and connection post-election day?
So I don't want to be redundant, but Terry Ann, whoever had that idea at Lehigh is just brilliant. So kudos to your university.
It was a student. The idea came from a student.
No surprise, huh?
We need to continue that legacy, to listen to the mouths of what we're trying to build within our universities, because our students, as we're trying to teach them civil engagement, and to have what we often call these courageous conversations, it's not just about election, it's about different religious tenets. As we talk about sexuality and sexual orientation, we're trying to build these different types of communities, and also even sometimes events or workshops where we're teaching them dialogue. And so
Yes.
up to the election, partnering with academic affairs and also our student leadership organizations and the student organizations, giving them that preparation to have these conversations, and also making sure we're working collaboratively and conjointly with our campus partners to have this civic engagement across campus. But I think it's also most important to say that we as a university are trying to be more proactive to stop being firefighters, and to be proactive in making sure that we're creating post-vention plans. And so we know what resources we already have available for students, and making sure that through health literacy, that we are educating our students on what's already available out there. But you made and a very important fact to be known, at least, is that what COVID shared with us, and also heightened with the current student populations on our campus, is that loneliness and sense of belonging was catastrophized. And so the current populations of students who are on our campus, the current data shows that they were already lonely. They were already sharing that they didn't have a sense of belonging. The election didn't do anything but make it probably more magnified, and also having to question it even more as far as, do I feel a part of in this larger spectrum?
Yes.
Of this macrocosm. And I wonder what people will think of me as I walk across campus today. So how are we supporting that narrative when it comes to within the classroom, and then also co-curricular outside the classroom? Did our universities do a good job of preparing for that? I think some of us possibly didn't have that information, but it doesn't mean that we still can't change and do better. And so we have to work collaboratively together. I don't think this is a time to go back to siloing and saying that it's all for the student affairs people to do it, or it's only for the academic affairs people to do it. We need to work across the lanes and say that now it's time for early intervention. If you see something in the classroom, see something, do something, and also vice versa. And even post-election, as we're preparing for the holidays, which is also another indicator of loneliness, how we our students just to prepare for life. Because these are the tools that we've seen through Healthy Mind Study, through NCHS,
Yes.
that these students do not have social skills, life skills to navigate life, as we like to say.
Yes.
We don't know how to life. And and so unfortunately, some of us are better prepared than others. So how do we teach our students to navigate with better skills? And I think Josh said it, our toolkits are not diverse. Some of us just have a wrench and a hammer that's not going to work right now.
Yes. And I really appreciate that. And I will say that the gifts that the university has to give, like that you have to give your students, especially in your roles when you're thinking about these support structures, the culture, right? All of that. The tools or the gifts are things like dialogue, right? Or I didn't come up with this, but it's a beautiful phrase that helps me so much, like a curiosity into another perspective. If I was you, I would be you. If I was you, I would vote like you. I would walk like you. I would talk like you. I would think like you. But that is like, that's a tool or a gift, whatever you want to call it. That is like to be able to even like have that kind of shift in thinking, right? Like those, and that is like, what a gift to give these students. And I mean, frankly, it's what we're all hoping and wanting for more than the actual real world, right? So it's like, it's a modeling thing. I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. And Terry Ann, I'm going to ask you a question about faculty integration into all of this, right? So it's thinking a lot about the students. Well, who is the most face time, right, with students, faculty? So, studies show that faculty play a critical role in reducing academic stress or increasing it. And in particular, how they are thinking about integrating well-being into the classroom. So how how are you, Leah, thinking about working with your faculty as a part of the learning experience?
So this is a campaign of mine. So Lehigh has what I would consider an excellent first-year retention rate of 94%. And still, we want to ensure that every student, I'm still concerned about the 6%, but also making sure that the students who do stay are happy while they're here. So we want to ensure that every student is confident that they belong at the institution. And so, as you mentioned, engaging faculty is an important part of that because they have more face time with the students than anyone else really. And so I've been working to encourage faculty to share the responsibility of ensuring that our students feel that sense of belonging. Sheree mentioned the silos that academic institutions are notorious for, and I really agree that it's important to break down those silos and to have that integration across academic units and student support units. So I've been encouraging faculty to implement some smaller practices in their classrooms. So for example, committing to learning all of their students' names, at least when the class sizes permit. We understand that there are some larger classes, but for the most part, we tend to have smaller class sizes at Lehigh. We're also creating more opportunities for faculty and staff to engage with students outside of the classroom. So for instance, in a context like the dining halls, we want to ensure that students aren't dining alone because they can't find someone to eat with. And especially given the social upheaval caused by the pandemic, we want to support them as they find their communities. College is where you find your people, but I think contemporary students may need a little bit of a nudge there. And so the provost, for example, has gone to eat a number of times in the dining hall and makes that kind of a practice. And we'd like to encourage more faculty to do that as well. We also adopted a strategy called the belonging intervention. And this is something that it's a simple exercise that takes very little time and effort out of a class. So this is something that we didn't invent this. It was developed by a colleague at University of Pittsburgh, who's a social psychologist. His name is Kevin Binning. And his research showed that there are overwhelmingly positive effects that in-class interventions initiated by instructors can have on a student's sense of belonging and their ability to adopt a growth mindset in their studies. So what we've done is included faculty members, or instructors, including TAs. We started the pilot in the math courses that had the highest DFW rates. And it's simply a matter of instructors sharing a little bit of who they are, introducing themselves beyond hi, I'm your professor, I've been doing this for X number of years, but talking about their experience, coming to love calculus, having had difficulties, maybe failing a class at some point when they were a student. And it's been remarkable to see how students really embrace the idea that, oh, wow, this person who is teaching me this course has had difficulties in this course. That means that it's not impossible for me to get through it. And it seems simple, but the research on it is remarkable in terms of students really feeling that they can persist in those courses. Students feeling that their instructor is a human being and not just this person standing in front of them speaking with these expectations that they should perform flawlessly in the course. So this was just piloted this semester. We don't have the data as yet, but just anecdotally from a student, the student was overwhelmed and said, oh, I wish we could do this in all of my classes. And it really just took some time out of one class session in the first couple of weeks of classes. And they really just got to know each other in the classroom setting. And it just offered more of a sense of humanity to the class.
Yes. What I love about that is that I think sometimes something like a strategy or a practice can start to feel like this big, new or different thing. And it's like, no. Just introduce yourself as a human being. That's it. Nothing fancy, no buzzwords. Just who are you? Maybe share a kind of one of the twists and turns of your own journey, a moment of failure, right? Or maybe something about your identity that might create a sense of safety or belonging for someone, right? I love how accessible that is. That just feels so accessible. I really thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And Josh, I'm going to have you now speak to another sort of direction in the community, which is thinking about elevating well-being into more senior leadership and conversations. So not every institution has an AVP of wellness or well-being or whatever the sort of variations on title are. So I'm curious how you are elevating the importance of student well-being as a top priority, right? Like top of the agenda for that top administrative team at the university.
Can I say, does anybody have any answers to that?
Yeah, we will be crowdsourcing the response to this.
I think I appreciate that question. And I'm going to first acknowledge Terry Ann. So far I've walked away with, all right, so we've got a civic engagement day and we've got faculty introduce themselves in class. So basically this is a steal from Lehigh webinar. So thank you for, at least I think that honestly, I think the pathway to elevate it is there because this is not new. You go back to Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone. We've been talking about loneliness and the impact on student success. I work at a large public land grant institution that, our state has been good to us compared to some of my peers in terms of the percentage we get, but we have not kept up with mandatory costs. So every year I have a budget reduction that comes. And so we are becoming increasingly tuition dependent. And it doesn't feel good to say it all the time, but the reality is student retention is an indicator in the budget conversation. And so the reality is when we do our jobs well, we help recruit students to campus and we help retain students on campus. When we do those two things and you are a more tuition dependent institution, that is an easy story to tell. And so I think that the reality of it is when we can frame the conversation, we can share the studies, we can share all of we know that well-being, I'll use mental health and wellness is a topic not just on college campuses. This is true across our communities. Here in Nebraska, we have a shortage of mental health professionals, not just on our college campus, within Lincoln, within the state. It's not new. Our chancellor knows that. My vice chancellor knows that. We're aware of it. How do you solve it is a challenge, particularly when we are, our services are primarily funded by student fees. And so I have this loop of I charge students more and create more financial stressors in the financial dimension of well-being in order to provide them more resources. So that conversation is there and we're trying to figure it out, but elevating it to the senior leadership, honestly, the most successful path I've found is how does it tie to recruitment and retention? How does it help us bring more students to campus? And as a land-grant institution, how does it help make us more accessible to the citizens of Nebraska? And when we do that, we're fulfilling our mission. And then once they're here, we want them to graduate. And it's relatively easy to tell that story when you have the pathway to be able to do it.
I really appreciate that. And please, Sheree and Terrian, if you have anything for any of you, if there's any responses or things you want to jump in, you can jump in. And I appreciate just the candor.
I just want to send glitter and funfetti over to Josh. It's coming your way, possibly even an edible arrangement just to have today. But I've constantly said that if we have to stop separating wellness and well-being from the conversation of enrollment management, from financial aid to academic affairs when we're talking about persistence and graduation rates, because it's all one and the same. And at the very beginning of the conversation, when we were talking about the difference between wellness and well-being, you all heard me mention that it has to start from entrance into exit. How we recruit the students, it has to start from there. If we're going out to recruit students who are diverse, but we don't know who those students are, and we're not preparing our campus to accept those students, we already have started at a deficit. Because when we're looking at it from a public health model, that term that we're using, that everyone's using so fabulously, is called upstream prevention. But upstream prevention says that you have to know the population that you're serving. And so we are trying to do these grassroots type of interventions of saying, we're going to go and we're going to recruit and we're going to increase our enrollment numbers. And so we bring in this diverse student population, and then simple as saying that we bring in more indigenous students or more African-American or more Hispanic students, but you can't tell those students where they can go get their hair done. You're already doing those students a disservice. Or you can't even tell them where the diverse places of worship are. You're doing your students a disservice. And then from a health and wellness and academic perspective, how many of them have hidden disabilities? Are you asking that question from a wellness perspective, not from a medical perspective? By saying, when you were enrolled in K through 12, did you have an IEP or 504?
Yes.
Many of our Center for Disabilities and Access are saying that we can work with that. We don't need the formalized testing anymore. We can take that and already get you at least started with accessibilities and accommodations in the classroom. So that way we're not extending the wait time. And so how we have done our formalized previous models has to be re-envisioned for today's students. Are you afraid of the transition? Do you think you may need help with making friends? Would you like to learn how to be to enroll with organizations and intramural sports? If we're not asking those questions on the front end, that's not upstream prevention. Have you already been in service with therapy or coaching or life coaching? If we're not asking those questions, we're already at a deficit. And that also doesn't help us in what we call statistical analysis as far as forecasting. If we go back and we're asking those questions already, we can now start looking at trends. So for the past 2 years, we were asking those questions and we saw that there was a 5% increase in students who are neurodiverse, because if we look nationally, we've seen neurodiversity increase between 5 to 15% on most college campuses. How have you prepared for that on your college campuses? And how have you prepped your faculty who are saying, I've never dealt with such increases in neurodiversity in my classroom, and I don't know how to deal with the complexity of the accommodation of my STEM courses? Because that's what it is.
It's so, I really appreciate what you're saying, Sheree, and I almost want to, I feel like this is like clinical language, but I'd almost wrap it all around the idea of the intake of the student, right? Just fundamentally. Isn't that what you do when you go to the doctor? Isn't there sort of a like, yes, who are you? Where do you come from? What are your experiences?
Yeah.
And then I so appreciate that. And I think that maybe that's where a lot of the opportunity, and they're talking about even some of the simple tactics, right? You know what I mean? Of how we can start to do that, or signal to students that that is safe to do, right? Like model it from the faculty. It's safe to talk about who you are and your identities. This is okay here, you know?
We have to change the language of how we ask the question. We can't say, do you go to therapy? We have to say, we can say, have you utilized any type of support, where you may have spoken to someone about your life situations, and especially chronic diseases. Like if you ask any of our type 1 diabetes students if they have a disability, they're going to tell you no. I've had and have lived with type 1 diabetes or sickle cell or lupus all my life. I don't consider that to be a disability. So why would I need accommodations and support?
Yes. Yes. Oh, these are fabulous examples, Sheree. And I'm curious. It's funny. The question I had teed up for you is a little bit of the other side of this, which is thinking about operationally all that you're talking about, right? And those are FTEs or centers or processes, right? Like the infrastructure that would make that possible, even if it's just folks training faculty, right? What are some of the biggest operational challenges that you're experiencing right now in meeting the student needs, or even, implementing some of these means of intake, and how, I guess, are you tackling them or thinking about tackling them, so that part of what you're setting up is right, like that it's that the practices are sustainable, and really become part of the culture. So what comes to mind?
The very first thing I had to do when I got here was I had to listen to the concerns of the campus. And listening with the concerns of the campus and to try to meet the needs of students, staff, and faculty, I had to go back to helping them to understand the definitions between wellness, well-being, but most importantly, how they define mental health and emotional wellness. Because what they were defining as, even as simple as emotional wellness, how I manage my emotions, and social wellness, how I make friends, they were coupling together and trying to send all of our students to counseling. And flooding our counseling centers, like, no, that's not mental health. That is emotional wellness, and that is social wellness. If our students are not making friends and they tell you that they're lonely, that's not mental health. We may have a social skills group or a group therapy for that may be housed in there, but there also may be other areas of wellness that can support that too. So in order to operationalize this, I had to start from the basics. I had to make sure I created a language that says, my famous line that all people know on this campus: we have to give agency to students' healing journey. That means that you can't send everybody to counseling. That movement is medicine, and we can send them to recreation and outdoors adventures, and that we can send them to nutrition, and that we can send them to wellness coaching. But we also, I'm going to steal from Terry Ann, we have to humanize that life will show up, and many of them many of our students, regardless on which side of the paradigm that they come from, low socioeconomic status or even well-to-do, was never taught how to navigate life or even to navigate a healthcare system. And so I had to, in order to operationalize how to manage our students in our wellness system, is to teach health literacy. They don't know how to make an appointment, but they also don't know what resource we have, but then they also just know that I'm unwell, so where do I start? And so we have to start from the basics, because there is a privileged assumption, point of privilege, that our students knew what to do. And even our faculty had it. And so I'm like, no. I said, did you know when you graduate how to read an insurance card or what a 401 plan is? So why do you expect these freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors to know it? And so to operationalize it, we had to figure out how to diversify income so we can get some programs to build out health literacy programs, to have what we call healthcare navigation, which we now have, which we have through our own insurance. We can call like, hey, I'm looking for. So students can say, I'm unwell and I know I need help, but I don't know what door to enter. Here's the door. We would help you find it.
That is so helpful. And I go back to the Lumina and Gallup report, or what, no, it was the other report that was showing the gap in the services existing and the students' awareness, and I think that actually, even in the framing, if you go into the report and the question asked of students, you're actually at the heart of it. What you're saying, Sheree, is they may not even understand, like, the literacy piece. Do I even understand the nuance between going to the health center versus the counseling center? Right? Like all of that. So I think I wrote this down and underlined it, shared language on a campus, just like we sort of started with, like, level setting, what is well-being. I think that's maybe one of the most also practical tips is just like shared language. And Terry Ann, I'm going to pivot to you around this idea of shared language or shared definitions in balancing rigor and support. Lehigh is a rigorous institution.
Yes.
Students want to be there because of that. So that is like a good thing. But with the rising mental health challenges, I'm curious, what are the conversations in balancing Lehigh's academic rigor while ensuring that students have the support they need to thrive? And can you give maybe a couple of examples from how that's very practically played out?
Sure. So we have observed in recent years that students' needs have changed rapidly, significantly. For example, during the height of the pandemic, we know that students were contending with illness and death of family members, and we're seeing ongoing mental health challenges and changes in social practices. I don't believe that Lehigh's standards for academic excellence should change or will change. However, I believe that we need to adjust our approach to educating students to ensure that they're learning. So one of the key initiatives of the recently launched, it's been a little over a year since it was launched, is our 10-year strategic plan. And one of the key initiatives is to apply learning science and universal design for inquiry to innovate the classroom experience and to personalize education for each student. Now, this isn't something that every faculty member is going to immediately adopt, but it is an approach that new faculty will be learning, and that some faculty who are already here are really eager to apply. And the idea is that it centers students. It's not just focused on teaching in the way that we've traditionally done it, but it's an approach where we would consider, for example, assessments. We have this belief that there are perhaps exams and papers, and it invites us to reconsider how we're providing information to students and also how we're assessing them by engaging students in that discussion and making sure that they understand the reasons for learning the material that they're learning, but also the reasons for the style of assessment. So that they're
Mm,
not just doing something to check a box. And so it's one of the innovations that we are working on. Faculty are being offered the resources and the preparation to create new programs and approaches to student learning and to student success more broadly. So this kind of support is available to the faculty. They're really encouraged. So it's not that we're adjusting the rigor in any way, but we are adjusting the ways in which we approach students, right? So the expectations are the same, but we need to move. We need to modernize with students.
yeah, and there's I think underlying like inclusivity, like
Yes.
right, the shift, which is even I think we mirrored even into how many classrooms are structured, right? It's sort of right like the faculty member to the mass of students and just shifting all of that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Josh, I'm gonna shift back over to you here, and I'll do this question, and then maybe we'll sneak in a last final round before we shift into the group breakouts. Time flies. There's so much to talk about related to this. But this has been fantastic. So Josh, for you, student affairs is at the heart of student success. In your role, I'm curious how you're thinking about integrating well-being into that broader, quite broad student success strategy initiatives. And do you have any examples of partnerships or projects that have helped to build a culture of well-being across the academic and curricular spaces?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I guess I would start by saying student affairs may be, involved in it. I don't know that, as you said, where's the time period with faculty? And I love Terry Ann's point of the faculty connections, and we know the high impact practices and all of those aspects that are there. And so I think I actually messaged Sheree on this process. I attended a webinar a couple of weeks ago by a design group that used the phrase, how do we make our campuses student ready? And I loved the
Yeah.
framing of, each one of us has talked about it a little bit. And so, I use, it's not quite as elegant as Sheree's comment about, uh, the student's well-being journey or health, healing journey aspect, but our students don't care what we call ourselves. I mean, the reality that academic affairs versus student affairs versus they want what services are available to me. And so I think and I saw some comment about hidden navigation among first generations, and the idea of how do we make things accessible. And I think we spend a lot of time, we higher ed, I hope we don't do it on our campus, although we do. We spend a lot of time worrying about who does this. So this is this person's job and this is this person's job. And in reality, our students don't care about that. That if they need mental health services, we have multiple clinics. I mean, we have clinics that are part of our academic programs, and students can go to there, then go to our counseling center that's funded by student fees. We have a marriage and family. How are we integrating it holistically so that students, sure, I love your image. You don't have to know which door to walk through. Walk through this one and we'll help you get there. And so for us on our campus, what that's meant is, again, I talked a little bit about a well-being collective. And so we've started within student life this idea of having a collective impact approach to well-being. And we have a group that meets on a recurring basis led by our Amy Lanham, who's our director of campus recreation, but it includes our health center, it includes our advocacy and support office, it includes services for students with disabilities, which is our access office on campus. And so the idea that this is not one person's job, that it's spread across all of our areas. And I think on our campus, that leads to, we've developed a curriculum, or we call it the student experience. And so we have student Husker Power, or Husker Student Power, I think is what it's called. And so the acronym of Power, and Husker Power is a chant originated within our athletic program. And so it has a cultural meaning on our campus, but it's about your journey. But the W in Power stands for well-being. And so we've integrated with our undergraduate education and student success. So Terry Ann, similar to your roles of how do we connect to those areas that are focusing on student success, and well-being is a shared language and a shared goal and a shared frame that we're all working towards for that. So I think part of this is everybody's doing the work, but students don't know how to get to it. And so how do we set up the messaging that allows students to know what door to walk through, and then we get them to the services that are there? We may not need new services. We need new ways of talking about our services.
Thank you, Josh. I really, You're so down to earth about it. It's real. I'm serious. I love it. And you're so good at centering the student too, right? Just like right, just reminding us like they don't care. They don't care what they don't care what your job is, your title, where you sit. Like there's
I
like
try
a
not to tell our research faculty that fact.
but there's a freedom in that too, right? Because then I think there's some now we can find some creativity, right? Like you get out of the confines of kind of your own limitations, right? So thank you for that. A closing question here before we go, and this one's just totally different and back to kind of just being humans together. So closing question, um, leadership is weighty and it's tough. But there's also moments of humanity and levity. And I'm just thinking about your own leadership journeys. What's a surprising aspect of your leadership style that others might not see? And when you're like navigating a particularly demanding day or week, or how do you find energy again? I guess you could pick one of those, or it's sort of two questions, but let's do Sheree. Let's hear from you, and then Terry Ann, and then Josh.
I absolutely love music. And so if I need to refill, it depends on how I need to refill and how much. So it's like my barometer, like what percentage I need to go up. And I'm very eclectic. And this is no offense, hopefully it's not offensive to anyone. The only type of music I do not like is like rock at all. And heavy metal, but you can find me walking in my office and I can be listening to country, reggae, gospel, R&B, some rap, but it gotta be like 80s and 90s rap type of stuff. And then the only type of music that's like newer that I like, for some reason, like us who are like 80s babies, they call us the older millennials. We call it Auntie Glow, but Glorilla, her whole album right now, I don't know, she's like the newer little Kim for us. And so I'm a music head. So if I need to refill, and I'm a music buff. And so my directors know that, and they're like, what's your mood today? I'm like, oh, I'm gonna listen to a little go-go. So let's just start the meeting with little go-go. They're like, Brooks and Dunn today? I'm like, Brooks and Dunn, Dixie Chicks. So it just
I love that is unexpected. I love it. I love it. Terry Ann, how about you?
So two things come to mind. When I first started as a faculty member, I had a colleague whose office was next to mine. And so I kind of made him my mentor, whether he liked it or not. So I would constantly barge in and ask for advice. Should I do this or that? And he would always ask these questions. Is it fun? Are you going to have fun doing it? And I really took that to heart. Now, I can't lie and say everything I do right now is fun, but I do ask myself before taking something on, am I going to get any joy out of this, any fulfillment? And I have to say, I get a lot of fulfillment out of the results of things that I do. And then separately from work, I have very firm boundaries. And I really make an effort to carve out time that's untouchable. And I think that's something I established very early in my career that has really protected my own mental health as I deal with these challenges.
Thank you. And what a model for like a student if they were to learn that about you, right? Like what a difference that could make. Oh, I love it. And then Josh, bring us home.
Great. So I think mine is I start with I'm an early riser, and so quite honestly, the cup of coffee in the morning, in ideally outdoors, is a key aspect of it. So Terry, and you talk about firm boundaries. There are very few days that I don't start with a cup of coffee on my back deck before everybody else gets up, because it helps center me before I even get started on the day. And so that's one piece on it. The second maybe is a little bit more fun. My undergraduate education is in middle grades and secondary ed. I thought I was going to be a teacher, and so everybody laughs at me. I still start with TSWBAT for the student will be able to, for learning objectives on it. And I took a ropes course facilitation class at Elon College when I was in school, and every element is supposed to have an objective. And one of the objectives that was okay is, I remember he wrote it on the board, FUNN, which is functional understanding not necessary. And so I feel that sometimes it's okay to just have fun. While we try to be intentional and we try to have objectives, sometimes the objective is fun and we need to be able to do it and we need to acknowledge that that's a part of what we do.
Yes, just have fun. Thank you all so much. You can give them a hand. I know it's hard to get good applause going, but give a little emoji shout out here. Thank you all so much, especially on a day like today, which does have a lot on your minds and likely calendars. So I'm just so grateful. And to tee up the small groups, we're gonna send everybody out now in just a second. So when I say go, you will be taken out into your group, and you and your group can figure out, there's kind of two themes here, questions, and you can actually decide as a group where you want to dig in. But the first is around barriers to well-being and institutional strategy. So what's getting in the way? And then the second piece is reducing the barriers and meeting students where they are at. So be empowered as groups. You can go off. And thank you again, Josh, Sheree, and Terry, for your company and your wisdom and your presence today. So